This video, by the way, this is the next video in the Advanced Guide series. This video covers the context, the React context part of it. I'm going through it for the first time also, and I posted the link to this advanced guide in the description of this video, so you could review it yourself by going to that video. So this one context, I think they're saying as of version 15.5, React.prototypes helper is deprecated and we recommend using prop types. So we already know that, so prop types library to define context types. Okay, so looks like we'll have to use prop types library to define context types. Once we dig in, we'll know what exactly that means, I guess. So with React, it's easy to track the flow of data through your React components. When you look at a component, you can see which props are being passed, which makes your apps easy to reason about. In some cases, you want to pass data through the component tree without having to pass the props down manually at every level. You can do this directly in React with the powerful context API. So they're saying in some cases, instead of passing like from, let's say you have a parent, and from parent to child one, and from child one to that child's children. So if you want, instead of passing it from one parent component to a nested child, from the nested child to another nested child, like that, they're saying that you can pass data using powerful context API directly to the component that needs to get it. That's what I got from the first two paragraphs. And this one is talking about why not to use the context. I think they're saying in a vast majority of the applications, they do not need to use context. If you want your application to be stable, don't use context. It's an experimental API, and it is likely to break in future releases of React. So they're saying it is experimental. This context itself is experimental, the context feature. They're saying don't use it because it's not stable. It's an experimental API, and it's likely to break in the future releases of React. I don't know what doesn't break typically in future releases. I mean, anything you use will break if there is a future release. Anyway, so if you aren't familiar with state management libraries like Redux and MobX, don't use context. For many practical applications, these libraries and the React bindings are a good choice for managing state that is relevant to many components. It is far more likely that Redux is the right solution to your problem than that context is the right solution. So they're saying use Redux or MobX instead of using context. And they're saying Redux might be a right solution to your problem in most cases. If you aren't an experienced React developer, don't use context. So for beginners, maybe using context is a bad idea. So there is usually a better way to implement functionality just using props and state. So instead of using context, they're saying implement functionality using props and state, and that is a better way of doing it, is what they're saying, using props and state. If you insist on using context, despite these warnings, try to isolate your use of context to a small area and avoid using the context API directly when possible, so that it's easier to upgrade when the API changes. They're saying that if you want to use it, just use it in a isolated small area, so that if there is when the API changes, you can upgrade, you can make changes only to that small piece of code. You don't have to rewrite the entire app, is what they're saying. So how to use context? Suppose you have a structure like sample button React component, and this one is rendering a HTML button, and looks like you can pass in style, and then the button itself can have children. And then you have something called message, which is another component. This component will show looks like it will show a property called text inside a div, and it also has a button, a React component called button, which takes color as input, and the button's name is delete. Okay, so there is a button. So this button will show you whatever. So let's say this delete button, the children here is, it'll show delete here, and whatever color you pass, that is also being shown. Okay, and there is a message list component, and this message list component is going through a list of messages and creating a bunch of message React components. And then this message list, basically, it has to return a top level JSX div. That's what it's doing. So they're saying in this example, we manually thread a color prop in order to style the button and message components appropriately. Using context, we can pass this through the tree automatically. So what they're saying is here, if you look at it, so we are passing color here. Oh, sorry. Oops, what happened? Sorry about that. Okay, so looks like I hit the back button accidentally. So anyway, if you see here, color purple is being passed from this parent message list component, React component. From there, we are passing it to the message component. From message, it's being passed to the button React component, and then inside the button component, we are styling it. So they're saying instead of going through that many layers, we can do it using context in a different way. Let's see. So to do it with context, looks like we have to use the prop types. So we import the prop types module, and then what they're doing here is button extends React component button style this dot context dot color. Okay, so the button itself, the button's property itself is being set using this dot context dot color. I wonder if this dot context is like some kind of a global variable. Oh, okay. So basically, using prop types, not only can we set default values you can also set context types. So we are saying, hey, this button has a context type of color, which is a string property. So if you see when that happens, so I think if you see this button, to this button we are not passing from the parent, we are not passing it any property. So this is the master parent object messages list. In messages list, we are defining a method called getChildContext, which returns color purple. And when you render it, you're rendering it. There is nothing being sent to message text. There is no color being set here. So I think maybe this will indicate that, hey, one of the children will take a property called color. I'm guessing that's what this means. But anyway, we'll see. So message list, I think on the element itself, we are setting a property called child context types. And that one also takes that, we are saying that, hey, this one, the child context types, we are setting that property to an object that has color as one of the properties. So basically the highlighted ones are the changes we have to make to use context. I think when we want to set style using context, in this case to get the context is color, we use this .context.color, and that's what we are setting to background color. And we define the button's context types using something like this, color prop types.string. And if you see, we are not passing the color property to the button. We are not passing it even in message list or message. So even in message list, there is nothing like we are not passing color to the instantiation of the message object. So anyway, so the main two things that were done were I think the parent object itself defines two things. One is the child context types, and then the get child context. And the leaf component itself has something, will use the context.color, and then it will also define context types. Okay, let's see. By adding child context types and get child context to message list, React passes the information down automatically, and any component in the subtree, in this case button, can access it by defining context types. If context types is not defined, then context will be an empty object. Okay. So basically what they're saying is, I think the parent object has to define two things. One is child context types and get child context. And then React passes the information defined in child context types all the way down to every element in the tree, every element in the subtree. And if any of the elements in the subtree define context types, then that element can use this .context, is what they're saying. Okay. I wonder what the disadvantage here is. So parent-child coupling, context can also let you build an API where parents and children communicate. Oh, you can use it for two-way communication also. For example, one library that works this way is React Router v4. Okay, so it looks like React Router v4 uses context to communicate between the parents and children. So import browser router as router route link from React router DOM. Const basic example. Okay. I'm going to reduce the font size a little bit. Maximize this window so we can see more of it. So parent-child coupling context can also let you build an API where parents and children communicate. Yeah, so React router uses it is what they're saying. Okay, so React router is part of React router DOM is what they're saying. Import browser as router route link. So we are importing three different objects from the React router DOM module. And then, so basically we are saying everything inside of here is routable. And then, okay, so by passing down some information from the router component, each link and route can communicate back to the containing router. Okay. So in this case, what they're saying is, so this will allow, so looks like when they click on a link called, let's say, home, we are saying, hey, route use component home. I don't know what exactly how this translates to, but when they click on this, router will take care of saying that the path is slash. So basically link and route are communicating with its parent router and that is allowing the changes to the route. So before you build, components with an API, like similar to this, you should consider if there is a cleaner alternative. For example, you can pass the entire React component as props if you'd like to. Okay. I don't know if that's the cleaner way, but that's one way. So referencing context in lifecycle methods. So if context types is defined within a component, the following lifecycle methods will receive an additional parameter, the context object. I just increase the font size some more. So that's saying if context type is defined within a component, so referencing context in lifecycle methods. So if context types is defined within a component, the following lifecycle methods will receive an additional parameter, the context object. Okay. So if context types is defined, looks like the constructor, all of them receive an extra additional additional parameter called context. So referencing context in stateless functional components. Stateless functional components are also able to reference context if context type is defined as a property of the function. So the following code shows a button component written as a stateless functional component. So const prop types, okay. So even functional components, we can define context types even for functional components is what they're saying. Updating context, don't do it. React has an API to update context, but it is fundamentally broken and you should not use it. So basically context, I think we shouldn't touch context at this point because it looks like the context API itself is experimental and looks like there are a lot of things that are broken in context on top of it. The get child context function will be called when the state or props changes. In order to update the data in the context, trigger a local state update with this .set state. This will trigger a new context and changes will be received by the children. Okay. So they're saying don't update the context. In order to update the data in the context, trigger a local state update with this .set state. So they're calling it this .set state to trigger a change to the context. So it looks like whenever the state changes, then get child context will automatically get called. So the problem is if a context value provided by component changes, descendants that use that value won't update if an intermediate parent returns false from should component update. This is totally out of control of the components using context. So there is basically no way to reliably update the context. This blog post has a good explanation of why this is a problem and how you might get around it. Okay. This is what context is. I did not fully understand context, but looks like they're saying don't use it. It's the API is still experimental, and you can use it to update or communicate between the child and the parent. And the parent can either send something to the child or the child can send something to the parent. That's all I have. In the next one, what is the next one? Oops. Oh, the next one is web components. In the next video, I'll go through web components. So basically, web components is a W3C standard. I think looks like web components are different compared to React components. I think this will dig a little deeper into it. So anyway, so let me stop the video here, and in the next video we'll cover web components.